Welcome to the Sharkpreneur podcast with Kevin Harrington and Seth Greene. Kevin Harrington is the inventor of the infomercial, one of the original sharks from the hit TV show Shark Tank, and has generated over $5 billion in TV and digital direct response sales. Seth Greene is the world's first trusted authority on cutting-edge direct response marketing, a best-selling author, and the only 3-time Marketer of the Year nominee. On the podcast, Kevin and Seth interview sharkpreneurs who share straight talk on what it takes to explode your business.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com. Welcome to the podcast. This is your host, Seth Greene. Today, I've got the good fortune to welcome back a repeat guest, Dan Simon, who today we're going to talk about his role as the CEO and co-founder of Qwoted, a platform we use all the time that connects journalists, podcast writers, and producers with expert sources and PR professional. Dan, thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me, Seth.
All right, so let's go back in time on the Qwoted front. How did Qwoted get started?
I had made a good living as a PR person, and PR people are essentially intermediaries. They're not wildly different from travel agents or dating matchmakers. If anyone is old enough to remember those professions that no longer really exist, they sit in the middle between people that need journalists that need to speak to brands or experts and companies that need to be featured in the media, what we would call earned media. And it's a very antiquated business. It's still a very lucrative business. We were very successful at it, but essentially it is to a certain extent much overdue for reinvention. And sort of one day I was sitting there and looking at our sort of 20 clients that paid us $1 million each, and I thought, that's great business, but most of the time you're saying no to reporters with only 20 clients to represent. If they say, okay, have you got a female financial advisor in Wisconsin? You would say, no, but I've got a male financial advisor in Michigan. So why don't you talk to them? That's the job of most PR people, is to sort of squish round pegs into square holes. And I thought, if instead of having 20 clients who each pay you $1 million, if you had 1 million clients who each paid you 20, then the answer to the media would always be yes. Yes, would you like, where in Wisconsin would you like your female RIA to come from? Would you like an African American one? Would you like an LGBTQ one? So that is essentially the genesis of Qwoted. Now, obviously, it's easy to say and really hard to do. Creating two-sided networks is famously unbelievably difficult. But that's really it. It occurred to me that we could do several pieces of good at once. One is we could start saying yes to reporters, which is a very unusual experience for PR people. Yes, yes. And all we do at Qwoted is say yes. They say, do you have someone who can help me? Do you have an African-American former fighter pilot with NASA experience? Yes, we do. So that's nice. And then the other thing is that we were able to sort of democratize access to the media to people who typically can't afford very large PR agencies. I always used to joke that I made all my money making sure that only old white dudes made it onto CNBC. And the nice thing about Qwoted is that we're elevating voices that wouldn't typically be featured in the media because they can't afford, very large retainers.
That makes a lot of sense. What makes this, how do you define who a source is, and what makes them genuinely useful to a journalist? Like, what do you say to the company watching this and saying, well, I don't know if we're newsworthy, I don't know why they would cover us, type of thing?
Yeah, I think that, there's a few different things, as sitting as you have on both sides of this. I think there's a difference between newsworthy and useful, right? You're right. You may not be newsworthy if you are if you are a financial advisor and we'll keep it to, your area of expertise, which is, it's also an area I happen to know pretty well. If you're an RIA in Wisconsin and you buy another small RIA in Michigan, Barron's may not cover it. But that's what newsworthy means, and you're absolutely right. That may not be the most newsworthy story of the day. That said, doesn't mean that your expertise in a particular subsector, maybe retirement or divorce or legacy planning or Midwestern wealth management, might be incredibly valuable for someone. And so, I think that's the slight difference. Not everyone is newsworthy, but largely, if you've spent a lot of time dedicated to a particular area, and that could be financial advice, or it could be yoga, or it could be Pilates, or it could be dry cleaning, or it could be you've been an academic, then you've probably got something of value to share. In fact, actually, the biggest thing that we have need for on Quoted, which is just candidly something that we still work to try and figure out how to solve for reporters every day. Most of the time, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, BBC, AP, they're not actually looking for expertise. They're looking for someone who was near the scene of the accident last night. So what we would call man on the street, or someone who's, lets their kids eat Mars bars, or someone who feels strongly that it's okay to give their 2-year-old the iPad. Like, actually, that is the thing that reporters are looking for the most, the sort of the vox pop kind of thing. So it's not even about being an expert. It's just having a unique perspective. And that's an interesting area because there's a tension there. People say, well, how do you define expertise? And it's like, I don't. We let the reporters define the expertise for given, which changes. Some days they may need a PhD. Some days they may not want, they may not want someone with a PhD. So we're not here to kind of enforce what expertise means. I think the biggest role that we play at Quoted, which is important, I think, in 2026, is that we're here to make sure people are who they say they are. So that is the difference. It's like we're not here we're not the police enforcing what constitutes expertise, but we are going to be ruthless about making sure that you didn't just make that up with AI. You say you're sitting in Bangor, Maine, but you're sitting in Bangalore. And that you are the person that you represent to be, which I think in 2026, with so much misinformation, AI slop, people meddling in elections, this stuff is going to be authenticity and trust. We want to be the safest place for the media to do their jobs on the internet.
So that segues perfectly into my next question. As a business owner or professional trying to get media coverage, what are the biggest red flags that would make a journalist ignore a pitch?
Well, there's a tension there because if you look at the data inside Quoted, the number one determinant for success, if you are, let's say you see a request on Quoted, and maybe we should just back up a scooch just to say, most of what happens on Quoted, it's entirely free for you to put your expertise on there. If a reporter reaches out to you, we will never gate that interaction. So if you're a financial advisor, you put your profile up on the platform, a reporter finds you, they reach out to you, and we will never gate that interaction. Most of what happens though on our platform is the other way around. Reporters will say, I'm looking for a financial advisor, and then our AI will match that request against your financial advice expertise and then send you that and say, hey, you might want to throw your hat in the ring to respond to this request. And so the number one determinant, interestingly, for what, for whether you achieve success or not is speed. It's actually speed. It's actually like the quicker you can get back to that person, because reporters, are rarely on our platform thinking about something they're going to be writing in 2 months. It's more likely they're thinking about something they have to get done by 2 p.m. So, they want speed, but the flip side of that is that, what the quickest way to do something is with AI. And then we have AI trackers on the platform that says, you might want to be thoughtful about using this because this person's used AI. So I think there's a tension between speed and trust, speed and authenticity. And so, I think fleshing out your bio and your profile pages so that you've got everything ready for the reporter. You're not making, if you've been featured, we give you the ability on your profile pages to like feature where you've been featured in the past. If you were embarrassed, if you did a video interview, even if it was for a smallish podcast, like upload it so that the reporter can get the best picture of you quickly. And then, I would personally avoid just dumping everything into GPT and, um, but also at the same time, don't spend 2 days thoughtfully writing out a small white paper because the story will be filed by then. So some navigation of that tension between speed and authenticity, I think is how you achieve maximal success. And the good news about the speed is that speed matters more than brand. So if you are an independent RIA, you have it's a good level. Speed is a good leveling playing field. The reporter isn't necessarily waiting to see who's writing from Morgan Stanley or who's writing from Schwab. If Morgan Stanley's filing 10 minutes past deadline, it doesn't matter if it's Larry Fink himself writing. The story's been written and done. So that has a nice equalizing effect. And we see plenty of, we stick on the idea of financial advisors. Obviously, Qwoted is for everyone. But I often have financial advisors who are achieving wild success on the platform and write to me and say, my clients think I'm Warren Buffett. I'm in Barron's, I'm in, Financial Advisor magazine, I'm in all of these places. And I never thought I would be featured in this way. And it's just because they figured out the machine. They're quick off the bat. They filled out their profiles. They give the reporter what they need.
Those are great examples. What are some other things that make somebody worth quoting?
I think I think it's the man bites dog, dog bites man. I think if you say the same thing as everybody else, I think, and again, I want to be careful about that because often reporters are looking, it's confirmation bias, right? If you think about an average story, it usually says, on the one hand, X, and Professor so-and-so says, yeah, it's like that. But on the other hand, Y, and financial advisor Dave says the opposite, right? So often they have mentally these sort of frameworks where they're looking for someone to just confirm the bias of the piece or the inherent kind of direction of the piece, right? And so I want to be careful when I give the advice not to say the same as everybody else, because sometimes a reporter is just looking for someone to say, you know, active investment is on the rise, or more wealth managers are interested in private assets, and more clients want to get into private assets. And you're not trying to have to always have the opposite take, but I do think that if you strive to come up with at least some unique angle on a well-trodden story, I think is something people should strive for. I think brevity is the soul of wit. As Shakespeare said. I think that if, again, it's about that speed, it's about making it comprehensible for the reporter. If you dump your white paper and you say, oh, there's a lot of good stuff in here, you may be right, but who has the time to parse all of that? And so you're better off taking an extra second to kind of, here's a couple of quotes, here's a couple of real zingers or real nuggets. The average written quote is somewhere in the region of about 15 to 20 words, and the average on-air quote is somewhere in the region of like 8 to 12 seconds, right? So keep that in mind in terms of what you give, right? That's all they can use. So, if you make them try and condense War and Peace into that, they're going to be less inclined to use it than if you came ready with those 15 pithy words. So I think getting into the habit of writing good bumper stickers is a good habit to form if you're going to be a user of Qwoted.
Absolutely. Makes great sense. We know your time is incredibly valuable. We greatly appreciate you talking about Qwoted today. For our folks who watching and listening and want to learn more, maybe get some PR coverage for their business, their RIA, their practice, whatever business they're in, where is the best place for them to go to sign up?
Qwoted.com. It's QWOTED.com, and it's free to sign up. It's free to put your profile on the platform, and it's free to engage with these reporter requests. Some people do. We do have a paid option. It's very cost effective. It's designed to be significantly cheaper than any PR agent that you might hire, so you can do it for yourself. But it's free to get started. It's free to answer. About 80% of our users never hit a paywall on the platform, so there's really no downside.
All right. Well, this has been Seth Greene with Dan Simon from Qwoted.com. Dan, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Seth. Great to be here.
Likewise. Thank you, everybody, for watching or listening. We'll talk to you or see you next time.
Why do so many businesses struggle while others seem to explode overnight? Do you wish you had the secret to this type of exponential growth? Now, I've scaled more than 20 businesses to over $100 million, and it's not just luck. In my new book with Mark Tim, Mentor to Millions, you'll learn the repeatable framework I use in all my business ventures for massive success. Order at kevinmentor.com and get over $1,000 in bonuses. Head to kevinmentor.com.